Hi guys, this is TC Lee on behalf of the Tank Club, and we're here today to have a chat about the mythic item, the Bloodlord's Embrace. And this is a particular item that I'm getting a lot of questions about recently in regards to how it can be used for tanking. And it can be used quite well from a tank perspective, depending on the circumstance. So it's very situational. And it's not something you're always going to use, and the reason for that is because you do have to lose your two-piece monster set to actually use this set. It's going to cause some issues there. If you need a particular monster set, you're not going to be able to use that, or you're going to have to one-bar a particular set. So it's not the easiest thing to fit into our regular tanking builds. So the main reason to use this set would be for somebody who might be struggling with their sustain, and with the Greymoor patch, we no longer, as the main tank, need to run a monster set. So if you're somebody who is struggling for sustain, this could be a good set to use. And it's far better to use a one-piece mythic item to increase your sustain, rather than using a full 5-piece set and losing a group buff. From a tank perspective, you will always need to use 2 group buff sets as your main sets, and then your monster set is more or less the thing that you can use to keep yourself alive, sustained, whatever it is you need. Let's have a look at the set first of all. So this is a mythic item. Now to obtain this item you will need to find the leads that are dotted all over Tamriel. You need to be at least scrying and digging level 7 to be able to obtain this particular item. Once you've got the leads and you've found the parts, you've dug up the parts, you've put together this particular mythic item, you can then start incorporating it into your build. The way you would use this, so let's say as a main tank you would use Yolnahkrin and Alkosh, and you would replace one of your monster set pieces, so your helmet or your shoulder, and use a Yolnahkrin piece on your helmet and shoulder instead. And then you would use maybe a one-piece monster set, so something like Swarm Mother that has got a max stamina and max magicka as the one-piece bonus is really nice. Something with extra healing, just something just to give you a little extra boost. But the main thing that you're trying to do here is to add this mythic chest piece into your build. Now what the mythic chest piece does is when you deal damage with a bash attack, you put a blood curse on an enemy, and then every time the enemy hits you and you block the attack from that enemy with the blood curse, you restore 1535 magicka every second. Now the reason this might be really good is it helps with your magicka sustain. On classes such as the Dragon Knight, you can convert your magicka into stamina by using the Helping Hand passive. So this could be really good for keeping up your stamina sustain while blocking, due to switching your magicka for stamina. So the way the set works is, first of all, you've got to bash the enemy. So when you bash a particular enemy, as you can see there, you've got just underneath the enemy's health bar, just there on the debuff tracker, you've got this blood icon, and it doesn't have a timer on it. That's because it stays there until the fight is over. It won't move target unless you bash a different target. If you go and bash a different target, it will switch to the other target. Now if you're in a fight where an enemy hits every 1 second, this mythic chest piece basically will be the equivalent of 3070 magicka recovery. So that's if you get hit every single second. Now if you also add on your actual magicka recovery on top of that, which will usually be somewhere between 1000 and 1500, you're going to be at sort of potentially 4500 magicka recovery. But this is only if you're being hit every single second. Now if we're being realistic about the whole situation, there's not many fights where a boss will actually hit you every single second, and the only real use for this is in a boss fight. Like in a trash fight you could use it, but it's not going to be that useful because ads die too fast, so you're not going to get much benefit. So the main reason to use this would be to use it in a boss fight. Now most bosses will hit every 3, 4, 5, 6 seconds. It's very unlikely to find a boss that does hit every second. There's very few. Kind's Aegis hard mode, or Kind's Aegis in general, that boss hits around every 1.5 seconds. So in fact this particular item might be useful if you're working on Kind's Aegis hard mode, really struggling for sustain. You could incorporate this into your build to give yourself more magicka and stamina. Most bosses won't hit every second, so if you've got a boss that hits every 3 seconds or 4 seconds, magicka recovery is every 2 seconds. So if we were to figure that out into sort of magicka recovery perspective, if it hits every 3 or 4 seconds, that's the equivalent of 383 magicka recovery. So it's a huge dip down from, if it hits every second, it's 1,535 magicka, which is the equivalent of 3,070 magicka recovery. Going down to every 4 seconds, that's 383 magicka recovery. If you then get onto a boss fight such as Asylum Sanctorium, St. Olm's hits every 5 seconds. So if you were to take a hit every 5 seconds while using this and convert that into magicka recovery would be 6 seconds, not 5. So that would equate to about 255 magicka recovery. So already it's really dipped down from the 1 second to the 6 seconds. We've gone down to 255 magicka recovery. So it's not quite as great as it initially looks. It's a good set if you are really struggling for sustain. It's better to use this and incorporate this into your build rather than using a 5-piece set to try and sustain. You could use a 1-piece instead and still keep the 5-piece, which would be the preferred option. But generally, you won't need this set for most content. You'll be able to complete most trials and dungeons without this. It's not an essential piece, but it would be nice for anybody that's struggling for sustain. So that is the mythic item, the Bloodlord's Embrace. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.